Hey, good morning. Happy Saturday. This is Coffee with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape, struggling in a dead end job, or a job transition, we're your hosts, George Murray and Lenny Newman, pitch hitting for Phil while he's out. We're here to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. We're glad you could meet with us early this Saturday morning. And oh, by the way, we do encourage questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as time allows. Hey, George.
Hey, good morning, Lenny. We want to thank our viewers, like you said, getting up so early on a Saturday morning. We are streamlining live from LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live. So if you are watching this either live on YouTube or pre-recorded, hit the subscribe button to get notified on our upcoming shows.
So, George, I can't help but notice that your first book, Hired, is now on Audible and iTunes. And now I even see you've got the cover of your new book, and your edited draft is going to final edit with your book due out this summer. Ignite, engage, and retain. George, you've been a little busy. Can you elaborate a bit more on this new book?
Yeah, a little bit busy. One of the things the last couple of years has really, forced a lot of people to really slow down and evaluate their kind of path, right? So whether their path was created 5 years ago, 15 years ago plus, this whole pandemic has really given people, kind of a perspective, and it's really put a challenge on employers and business owners and leaders. And so the book is really to help those business leaders and businesses really ignite a workforce, engage their team, even if they're in the hybrid sense or work from home, and then finally retain their talent.
Sure. Well, before we continue on, I want to thank our sponsor, Hired. Cut your search time in half for sponsoring the show. I wonder how you were able to finagle that sponsor, George.
Had to argue with the CFO.
If you know of anyone contemplating a career transition or possibly struggling in job transition, I suggest grabbing the book either on Amazon, Kindle, and by the end of this month, Audible and iTunes, and get Hired.
And it's out there already. So today's episode, we're talking about reversing the turnstile. What do we mean by that? Well, as we've talked about, these people last month alone, over 4 million people quit their jobs, right? And so, we want to make sure that we can help business owners and leaders combat the talent from leaving. Hey, Lenny, do you think we know anybody?
George, this might come as a surprise to you, but I know a guy.
I absolutely know a guy or a girl, right?
Well, right you are. I'd like to welcome to the show my dear friend and yours, George, a returning guest, none other than Larry Kaufman, best-selling author of The NCG Factor, keynote speaker, regional managing director at Jefferson Wells. Welcome, Larry. Nice to see you this Saturday morning.
Thanks for having me, Lenny and George. Good morning, guys.
Hey, good morning. So what you been up to, Larry, other than selling many thousands of books?
Working hard to retain and attract talent.
Hey, good answer. Good answer. Hey, so while we're talking on that subject, we've got 5 generations with these Gen Zs, millennials, baby boomers, etc., in the workforce. And it added increased complexity and flexibility in every changing business world. How are you helping to help those leaders adjust their approach?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is, so I'm a baby boomer, right? So on the cusp, and then I have all of those generations. Well, not all. I think I'm missing maybe one. But essentially, I look at it this way. You can't manage everybody in your teams the same way, right? You adjust and adapt. And I believe we have to adjust and adapt to the generations. And then you throw in COVID, which spikes and comes down, and that creates challenge too. And so I myself, the folks that work for me, we've adapted, and I encourage everyone else to think that way. Don't just assume you could deal with a millennial the same way you would deal with a baby boomer.
Absolutely. Lenny, you're on mute.
There you go. All right, I got it figured out. Hey, Larry, earlier in the show, George mentioned, the 4 million people, who quit their jobs in the month of April. And they're all thinking they can find the, greener grass on the other side. I'm curious, given your years of experience, Larry, what do you think's causing this, and what can leaders do to quote unquote either stop the turnstiles or possibly reverse them and get people coming back into their companies?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, it is greener and it's not greener on the other side, right? I think it's a candidate driven market at the moment. It's a great opportunity for people to be plucked from the companies. And I think, we have to have some of these real and honest conversations with our folks. Sometimes it's difficult, but I've had those conversations. Hey, I know it's competitive out there. I'm sure you're getting calls. I want to make sure you stay here.
Mm-hmm.
What's keeping you here, and what would cause you to make a move? And honestly, some people that have left, we stayed in touch with and we brought them back. And so I think, you may be upset someone's leaving. Don't burn that bridge. Don't get upset.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them, hey, I understand, but it may not be what you think it is. It may sound great. And we had someone leave, everything was great, and then they had to dress up every day. They'd go in the office, hated it, but we kept in touch,
I
and that
love it.
person came back.
So Larry, what I hear you saying is, people are going to make choices. They're going to look for other opportunities. But what I heard you say is keep that door open, keep the relationship intact.
And have real, open, honest conversations. And it really makes a huge, huge difference.
That's great. That's great advice. George, what thoughts do you have?
So businesses are struggling. We're talking about it, and in many ways to ignite the workforce, and engaging talent, even in the hybrid sense. And I'm sure with sales, not everybody's in a brick and mortar situation for you. So some of the critical metrics that you are measuring or helping businesses or clients, could you give us any examples?
So repeat that question again, George. I'm sorry.
So in the hybrid sense, or the work from home, because not everybody is in the traditional brick and mortars anymore, other than unless you're talking about Elon Musk's recent email, right? But the fact is how are you as a leader or helping businesses and clients, focus on the right metrics? And then could you give us examples? What are the things that you're measuring? You said earlier about that conversation, that one-on-one time. Maybe can you outline what that does that look like?
Well, I think clients, I guess our clients, we put people into consulting roles, but we also put people into permanent roles. And so I think we've been educating our clients, that, maybe in particular instances, they think, bringing on a consultant, from our corporation in a hybrid mode where their employees are all hybrid, that doesn't necessarily translate to a consultant, right? That has a whole different work and lifestyle, and that doesn't always work. So there's been some education and turnaround, and then the folks that we put into permanent roles, I think companies have to get a little more competitive. We're counseling companies where maybe their benefits, maybe they're not open to sign-on bonuses, they're not flexible with the work schedules. They're not getting creative, and they're just sticking to, hey, we're a good company, good culture. That definitely doesn't, apply to everybody. And so I think companies have to flex a little bit more and adapt a little bit more. So we're trying to counsel them that, yeah, I know you think you're competitive, but you know what? The pay rates for these particular roles are not in alignment with the market today, the role today. And so here's some things to consider doing. Or maybe you need to offer a sign-on bonus, a retention bonus, or some other perks and benefits. So there's a lot of change, and some companies that aren't adapting, they're coming back later and they're going, okay, We hear you loud and clear. Now we're going to change because we're not finding the talent.
Hey, Larry, just a brief moment for our viewers. If anyone does have any questions right now, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those as quickly as we can. I'm curious, based on what you're seeing in terms of temporary staffing and putting people into companies, what are you specifically seeing people do that are quote unquote preventing employees from leaving, and what can people do immediately when they show up for work on Monday to prevent that turnstile from, the exiting of people?
Well, again, like I said earlier, we have to adapt to those different generations. But I think what people are doing is they're offering some of these retention bonuses, some of these sign-on bonuses. I know in some of the big four, they're offering they're offering sign-on bonuses to interns. So it's getting a little bit crazy out there, but we have to realize that it is a candidate driven market. And so the things that we have to do are, like I said, it's still that communication and dealing with each person differently because everyone's home life, how they've been impacted by COVID. During COVID, people now have dogs, pets, everything's changed and even started some families, right? They didn't have before. So working on site is a little bit different. Even at my company, we do a work your way basically. We're a $22 billion company. So work your way. So we've created that flexibility. So I think we have to adapt, and that will help prevent some of that change and turnover.
Hey, Larry, I know that we just jumped into some of the fixes, but what do you think companies that are, struggling, what are they doing wrong that's causing all this people to leave? Because I read a recent article where the national turnover average is anywhere from 18 to 22%. And if you actually have a good culture, you have less than 12% turnover. So what are the bad companies doing that just simple things that they could start on Monday?
Well, I think you talked about Elon Musk before, and so he went to, hey, it's 40 hours on site. Now there's two sides to every story, right? So,
Hmm.
hey, there are folks that are in customer service, programmers that lead a different lifestyle, right? Where they could be remote, but the folks that have to go to the plants at Tesla have to be on site. So is it fair and reasonable? But I also say you have to look and go, well, you've got different workers. You can't put together a car from your home.
Yeah.
You have to accept that there are going to be, folks that will be hybrid or remote. And so I think companies have to say, you know what, I'm trying to hold firm, but we're in a talent shortage still. There's still a high quit rate. And so we have to adapt, and we have to also change our work environment if we're going to be hybrid. What can we do to attract people? What can we do to engage people? I think, we have remote workforce, consultants that work remotely, my staff. Are you happy? What else do you need at home? Right? What else can we do for you? If it's going to be hybrid, we're going to more dog or pet friendly, structures and setups and companies. You know, getting people more engaged, giving people meals at work. So companies are shifting. If you're not shifting, you're doing the same thing the same way that you did pre-COVID. You're going to lose your people.
Yeah, I would say that even in the non-traditional businesses that wanted to not go into this hybrid or at least work from home, the pandemic forced them to do it or die, right? Or at least
Mhm.
some form of it.
Definitely did.
So, Larry, suppose I'm a business leader and my department's experiencing all this turnover. What would you suggest to me as a business leader to do to potentially stem that turnover, or where do I go for help? What do I do?
Well, Lenny, I would say first of all, what's the root cause? So we do a lot of surveys, internal surveys with our clients, candidates. But what's the root cause? Have you actually sat down with the folks leaving to see, is there a trend? Well, yeah, it's my boss. Well, not everyone leaving has the same boss, right? But if all the people leaving have the same boss, Well, we know what that cost is. Is it the
Right.
culture? Is it the hybrid, remote? What might it be? So I think if you figure out the root cause, that will give you a good starting point. And just having open dialogue, and hey, put together a task force. What can we do better as a company to attract and retain people?
So Larry, the best nugget that I heard in there was, as a leader, look in the mirror and ask your people, are there some common causes? Can you have an exit interview with people as they're leaving and see if you can find out some common themes? And ultimately, it may come down to, as George mentioned earlier, some people aren't all that flexible. They want
Yeah.
people, as I call it, backseat, backsides in seats, and that may not necessarily be a good answer moving forward.
Very true, Lenny.
Yeah, there was also a recent article, probably just this past week, where they stated, businesses also have to be cognizant of the people that actually stayed with them through the thick and thin, right? The fact is they're bringing all this great talent in, right? And they're paying them anywhere from 10 to 20% more than people who've gone through the whole thick and thing. And that's what's forcing a lot of those people to contemplate, hey, what about me? Maybe I should go and ride this whole great resignation wave and try to get a big increase because my employer is not valuing me.
You're right. I mean, you just saw Microsoft put in, like a double budget, right, for everyone's salaries to retain people. And look, not all companies are capable of doing those things, right? Big, small, narrow margin companies, everyone is different, but you see companies, understand they have to do things a bit differently and be proactive.
Hey, Larry, one other question comes to mind. I know you're helping companies fill the talent pipeline. Can you just touch briefly on importance of speed to making decisions, as opposed to, in the past, there might be a long drawn out process. What are you seeing in terms of speed to make decisions, and how are you advising your clients?
Well, it's interesting. So, we do retain search, and we do, a lot of contingent. So we assume a lot of that risk. And so those companies that we talk to them up front, even for the consulting side, if you can't make fast decisions, have a defined process and follow through, we can't work with you. And so we've had to disengage because at times they can't get it together. They can't move swiftly. And so it makes us look bad to a candidate, that we're working with and trying to court them and help them. And they've got all their offers pending. It is that speed to market and a defined process and sticking to it. And if they don't, we'll talk to them about it. But if it continues, we can't work with that client because they're going to lose that talent, and it goes fast. So
Are
it's a
you
good
finding
question.
you have to deliver that message to the HR professionals and the functional people or hiring managers, or both?
I think it's across the board. And
Yeah.
look, everyone
Mhm.
has a different sense of urgency. You have to get everyone on the same page of that urgency, and some just don't get it. We're trying to educate them, and those you can't educate, it's not a good use of our time, their time, or the candidate's time.
Yeah, to that point, and I just say a point is that I was working with a client in January and basically put me on hold. We were in a video conference call giving a status update of the projects and everything else. And he was on a call for like 15 minutes, comes back, hey George, sorry, but this resume came in for a position that we have been looking for at least 6 months. He says it was on a Friday afternoon. The recruiter calls me and says, listen, this guy already has an offer in hand and another pending one. If you want this person, you've got to act fast. He's like, I had to turn around and set interviews up on Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, talk to HR on Sunday, get the offer out Sunday night. And he just called right now, Saturday morning, or excuse me, Monday morning, and accepted the offer. He's like, he's a baby boomer, right? He's like, I never moved that fast in my entire life.
But that was huge, and that's how they secured that person.
Yeah.
I love it. So introduce me because we want to work with people like that.
And it is a war on talent, and I think it's requiring people rethink things, how they do things, for
You're
sure.
right. You
Yeah.
have to
For sure.
adapt. You have to change everything.
Yeah, I mean, one other point is that in my book, and I want to tell people that I'm very thankful for Larry. Actually, he's going to be in my book because he actually gave me a lot of input to the book. And one of the points that we talk about in the book is, supporting the people that are still on board, because as those people are leaving, the work gets piled up and people get, stretched a bit thin. And so, in manufacturing, we're always working 24/7 operation, and they're struggling to retain people on the weekend shift, right? The 312s, right? It's a very difficult shift. So what we had to do is had to work with the client, approach it differently, and said, listen, you know what? People are not going to want to work 12 hours on a Saturday, Sunday, and the Friday, but maybe we can turn around and get core hours, 4 hours, and that's the approach we took. And with positions that we had open for 6 months, when we changed and shifted our approach, we're able to get that core hours fully staffed in a whole different perspective in a shorter period of time. And it helped the people that were still in there. So we reversed the turnstile because people were leaving because they were stretched thin.
Great solution.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, we're at that point. Believe it or not, the 22 minutes goes incredibly fast.
It did.
On behalf of George and our award-winning producer, Ethan, I'd like to say it's always a pleasure, and thank you for giving us some of your time this morning on Saturday. I think one quick thing, Larry, can you just tell us a little bit about your book and where our viewers can find it?
Sure. Thank you. The NCG Factor, it is on Amazon. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Larry.
And I also want to make sure that we thank our award-winning producer Ethan Connor, who's very much in the background but helps keep us on track here. Ethan was recently awarded Best Narrative and Best Sound Design on a short story called Cold War, which you can check out on YouTube. And George, tell us a little bit about our next show, buddy.
Well, first, before they do that, I want to thank Larry for his time.
Larry.
Yeah, well, we want to officially thank Larry and the viewers, right? So the NCG Factor, or, you can get the book, as he said, on Amazon, but I know you can also go to his website just before it get the NCG Factor right there, Kaufman-Larry.com. You can get the book there as well. It's a great book. Read it a couple of times. I know that Lenny seems to give out those copies quite often. And again, if you guys are struggling in your business to turn around and get talent, also reach out to Larry.
Well, and one last thing in regards to that book, it is literally a how-to book of networking and building relationships. And you're right, George. I recommend the book to just about everybody I meet with who's in transition, in addition to hired. But again, to wrap things up, Ethan, hats off to you for all of your recognition. Certainly well deserved. And George, I think we've got our show for 2 weeks from today. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2 weeks from today, and I'm sure we know a person, right? We always seem to know a person for a special guest. We're going to be talking. Yep. So we're continuing on this 12-part series on my new book that's due out in summer. And we're going to be talking about bench strength. It's ongoing as we travel through these last, couple of months going through this is how do I develop bench strength in my organization? How many business owners or leaders are like, I'm only one person deep in any skill, right? So we talk about that, we talk about, ways to turn and help those people and develop high potentials and next generational leaders, man. What a great business we would have if we had a lot of bench strength and high flexibility in our organizations.
So 2 weeks from today, mark your calendars. I believe that's June 18th for our next LinkedIn Live on bench strength. And until then, George, I want to wish all our viewers and you and your family a great weekend and week ahead. And remember to achieve forward and
get better.
Bye for now.